Hey everyone, tonight what we're going to be doing is taking the fuel rail off the Mazda and we're going to be swapping rails. I have one that's been powder coated that's much prettier. We're going to be putting that on and changing the injector seals. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. The hardest problem we're going to have is actually disconnecting the fuel lines because we are shade tree and we are not going to get the special tool. We're going to try to do it very carefully with a small screwdriver and just pop it off that way. We'll see how it goes. So let's go out there and get to it. Okay, so a lot of your cars won't exactly look like this. Because of my catch cans, I have a couple of extra AN lines on here. This one in particular, this is where your PCV valve would usually be, and it will be even easier for you to take this off. It's going to be a little black hose that just comes out and it just plugs in down here, and you can actually just pull that whole thing off. And I'm going to actually have to remove my AN fitting right here and my one over here for the crankcase breather, and you probably won't have to move that out of the way because yours is going to come out of the side and it's going to go into the air intake over here. Mine actually comes back here to the catch cans. So I'm going to take these two off real quick and make a little bit of room so I can get to stuff. Okay, now that I've got those out of the way, we're going to disconnect the knock sensor that's right here by the dipstick. You always want to be careful with these older plastic clips. They get a little bit brittle with age. I actually left these on here. This will be the bottom of your PCV that goes into the intake manifold. I actually left mine on because I put it on tight so I wouldn't get any vacuum leaks, and I put the fuel rail on afterwards. So I'm actually going to leave that on. It will be better for you to take it off if you don't have that. And to take off the fuel rail on a stock car with the, at least the all the Proteges, it's normally 4 bolts. There's 2 here and then there's the 2 up here. Now I have a 626 manifold and I don't have these top mounting points. I use them to tend my AN lines. So we can take these 2 bolts out real quick on here, and for you, the 2 up here, and the fuel rail will actually just pull off this way, and we'll disconnect the wire loom, or at least I will disconnect the wiring loom after I pull the fuel rail off. Okay, now that those bolts are out, there's a vacuum hose that goes onto the fuel pressure regulator right here, and just tuck that away. And then we have the fuel line over here. Now these can be a bit of a you know what to get off, a bit of an ex-wife to get off, but I don't think we will have a problem. So now that the fuel rail is out, I have to be a little bit more careful not to scratch anything because everything under here is painted. But basically just going to disconnect all of my injectors since we've got to get to the seals anyway, which are up under here. We've got to pull the injectors out. This will be easier with the wiring loom off. And I'm also going to remove the fuel pressure regulator, which I need to do because that's got to go on the other fuel rail. And I'll have more room with this fuel line off, and I can manipulate this a little bit better. Okay, I am back. I had to make a crown and coke. Too afraid of losing another 10mm socket. Incidentally, my replacement came in, so we're good to go. Now, taking my fuel rail off, taking my pressure regulator off, I have miscellaneous rags laid around now to protect my paint and to soak up the gas that is spilling out. Try not to drip any on your exhaust manifold, like I did. And if you have any paint under here, try not to drip it on that as well because, well, there's no reason to be dripping on pretty paint, especially when the paint work has been done by Signature Products. Contact Brian Lawler out of Elkhart, Indiana. He is awesome. He does amazing work. Highly support him. And CR3 Motorsports, Hydro Motorsports, etc. Okay, so to remove these fuel lines, a lot of people have the quick disconnect tool. I don't, because this is a shade tree operation. So you remove the little cover here, and they're actually pretty simple. This little blue clip here, and there's a red one on the fuel pressure regulator if you have to replace that. But you pull the protector off, and this blue clip lifts out with 2 different sides. And what the quick connect does, it actually goes in here and pushes this blue connect away, and it just slides off. We're going to try to do it with fingers as minimal cussing as possible and small screwdrivers. And painful knees. Boom. Just be careful not to break that, and I'm going to try to keep this in a way where it's not going to leak fuel any more than it already has. So now our fuel rail is off, and I'm going to check my leaking freaking gas all over the place. I think I'm going to actually take this off of here, and I'm going to try to drain the fuel out, and we'll cut back and remove our injectors. And I'm going to check this and see how it is. I have another one on my other fuel rail, but I'm going to check this one too and just make sure they're both the same. I'm too paranoid about things, even though I'm sure they're fine. And the injectors actually come off pretty easy, but I will actually probably take you guys inside when we switch all of these, so it's in a place where if I drop it, it won't get lost. Okay, I've actually checked the flow through the pulsation dampeners, and this one has more resistance in it, the one that's been on the car, and I don't know enough to actually make my own decision on this, so I'm going to swap them and leave them, keep my one that was already running on the car. And all I've actually done was I've loosened these, and I just use a crescent wrench, but it was on there pretty tight. So we're going to swap these and pull the injectors off and actually change all of our O-rings, and then we're going to stick them back in the new fuel rail. So let's do that real quick. Since, like I said, I've already loosened these. And a quick Google search has told me I don't want to mess with this at all in any way. And I am a self-proclaimed idiot, so I'm not going to start getting curious and jerking around on things, and to keep everything together. Okay, now the injectors actually just pull right out. I'm overly gentle with everything, don't mind me. I'm actually going to run fuel injection cleaner through this after I get all of it back together. Probably be a good idea if you take these off, make sure everything is clean. You don't want to get anything in the injectors and mess anything up, and these actually do not look very good. So that's the old fuel rail, and out with the old and in with the new. So let's pull the O-rings off of here and get these changed. Okay, so it's really easy. All I'd used was a small screwdriver to take off the old O-rings. Very careful not to scratch any of the surfaces, and put the new ones on, just put them back over the end of the O-ring. Try not to stretch them any more necessary, and plug them back in the fuel rail. And that's all there pretty much is to swapping the injector O-rings. I am going to run injection cleaner back through it after I get all this put back on. It's just a good idea since this thing has been off, and no matter how careful you are, you're still going to get a little bit of debris in it. That's just the way that's going to be. So let's go ahead and get this thing put back in the car. So basically, to put all this back together, we're just going to go in the opposite order of things. Goes on much easier and it comes off. Make sure everything seals, obviously. And we're going to put our fuel rail back on, attach our fuel pressure regulator, and keep on going from there. You want to be very careful and make sure everything seats back down the intake manifold. And then you can start reconnecting things like the knock sensor, if you didn't put your injector connectors back on. And there's little nudges on, hold on, let me get the other fuel rail. Can explain this better. Right here on all of the ends of the fuel rail where the injectors go are these little tabs, and the connectors center that, and that's how everything holds still on here, and you want to make sure that you do that. Mazda might have made mistakes, but they did employ people to do these things the correct way. And then back on with our pressure regulator here. Connect fuel line. I want to make sure everything goes back on straight. Like that. Start everything first. Make sure everything's going to fit the way it needs to. Do not drop the 10mm socket again. Fuel rail bolts. Okay, we're going to torque these down. We're going to torque down the fuel pressure regulator, and then we're going to retin these hoses, put all of our AN lines back, and don't forget our vacuum line here. And we'll come back to the finished product. And there we go. You want to go over everything, especially again, if you're not familiar with doing this procedure like me. I've had to go over everything 3 or 4 times. I want to make sure I've got everything on there. This is a fuel system that we're messing with, and could have a fire if we're not careful. So went over everything 2 or 3 times. The fuel rail's on good. The regulator's on. The fuel line's been connected. I've checked that 2 or 3 times. All of our wiring harness is back together. Our AN lines, or your PCV valve, which is what you would have. Our crankcase breather, all the lines are tended again, nothing is rubbing. Don't want to chafe that nice Signature Products paint. Everything seems to be as it should. So all that's left is to start it up, make sure it runs good, check for leaks. I highly recommend you get under here like a paranoid schizophrenic conspiracy theorist with a drop light and watch all of your seals, make sure you're not leaking fuel all over the place. But other than that, this job was actually pretty easy, and I cannot believe I've put it off as long as I have. Before you leave, we didn't lose it this time. Yes! Thanks for watching the video, everybody. Please like, comment, and subscribe right here for more Rage Fuel content. We'll see you next time.